911, what are you reporting?
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Damn it, I'm really confused. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence, and he was dead when she hit the ground. I didn't see any cars. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence.
What are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was?
It was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now, and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
And welcome, everybody. Hello, Daniel. What's going on, man?
I'm very, very well. How are you, Brian?
I am hanging in like a hair in a biscuit here in the Bigfoot bungalow, man. I am so excited about our roundtable today. Before we get into all of that, I just want to get into the chat here right quick and say hello to everybody. People have been patiently waiting. We got Troy in Tennessee, who was first in today. Hello, Troy. We got Ristall. Welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. We got Flat Rock in the house. What is going on, man? Long time no see. We got Scott Trent. We've got Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society. What is going on, Jeremiah? Glad to have you, man. Jimmy T's in the house. We've got Scott. Welcome to the show, man. Glad to have you. We got Deuster in the house. Tea Time with Tiffany. What's up, Tiff? And we got Social Squatch in the house. Welcome. We appreciate you being here for this star-studded lineup. We've got Trish in the house. Hello, Trish. I don't want to leave you out. She was posting about getting my book in the mail. I am so glad that you guys are finally getting those. I appreciate your patience with the pre-sale of the book. It did not go as planned as far as the shipping, but they should be arriving over the next couple of days. So we appreciate you guys for hanging in there. Welcome, Daniel. Your brainchild has come to life, man. It's time for the Bigfoot Roundtable. You have put this together. We have so many amazing people that are here to talk about Bigfoot. I've been super stoked about this. I appreciate you asking me to help you host this today. I have been stoked about it. It is not often that you get this kind of caliber of people together in one place at one time to talk about Bigfoot. So kudos to you, my friend, for helping to make that happen. And
Thank you so much, mate.
I say we get right to it. Let's start bringing these folks on and talk about them.
Yeah, let's get straight in. So if we want to introduce our first guest.
The man of the hour, one of the men of the hour, is Mr. Shane Corson himself. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks, Brian, for having me on. Thanks, Daniel, for the invite.
We are
very welcome, Shane.
So glad to have you. Without further ado, next on the list is Mr. Alex Pedikov. Welcome to the show, sir.
How you doing, guys? Thank you for putting this together, and thanks, Daniel, especially for the invite, man. Appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome, Alex.
We are glad to have you. Next on the list, the man who needs no introduction, the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Ryan RPG Golembeske. Welcome to the show, man.
Hello, representing all the Mr. Moms all over the world that love Bigfooting. Good to see you, boys.
We are glad to have you both on the show today. My friend and yours, the Bigfoot influencers himself, Tim Halloran. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Daniel and Brian. Just glad to be here amongst friends.
It is awesome to have you, my friend.
Thank you, Tim.
Next on the list, we have a pair here in the screen at the same time. We have Joe and Ron. Welcome to the show.
What's going on, guys? Hey, guys.
We are glad to have you guys. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us. And we have, last but certainly not least, we have Mike. Welcome to the show, man.
Good afternoon and evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you, gentlemen, for letting me join you this afternoon.
We are
You
so
are
glad to have
more
you.
welcome.
And
So
you got that
we
right.
have-
We got that. We've got people from everywhere, right? We've got people in the UK right now. We've got East Coast, West Coast. We had to wrangle a bunch of cats to get everybody together. So it is really good to have you all on the screen at the same time, and everything seems to be working at the same time. So Daniel, you go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So I want to thank you all for being here for the for this roundtable. It's an awesome lineup, and we have some amazing people in the chat. So I reckon, Brian, do we get straight in with our first question?
I say we do it, man. Let's go around the horn.
Let's go straight to it. Okay, our first question, without further ado, Shane Corson.
All right. Well, again, glad to be here. Glad to see all these familiar faces. My question, pretty simple. You know, with all the, pardon me, all the investigators and researchers out there, you know, that have been doing, you know, all this for many, many years. Is there anything, any one thing you would like to see implemented within organizations, individuals in the future here that maybe will help propel the subject further? Is there anything, or are we just at where we're at?
Very good question. Alex, we'll go to you first, my friend.
Oh boy. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical on this question. I think, unfortunately, with the kind of AI and everything that's going to be the onslaught of the AI stuff, I think it's going to be more difficult than ever. I think personally, chain of custody with any kind of alleged video or photo evidence, but at the same time, and we still have debates about the PG footage from the 60s and the Freeman footage and you name it, right? So I don't think video footage has cut it, or any kind of photographic evidence. I don't think it will. I guess I personally kind of think that if there was a situation where it might be applicable, let's say you got some kind of thermal footage or otherwise, and you had, you know, some DNA evidence, maybe something else to back it up, some tracks, so you have different tiers of evidence. I think people just need to, in general, the chain of custody with alleged evidence as well, document things. I think, you know, what like Chris Spencer and Shane and those guys, the OP do, they do a lot of note taking, a lot of meticulous stuff. And now with all the metadata and stuff, with photos and videos and 3D scans, like there's no excuse if you find a track to not try to at least take a 3D scan of it, take your photos, get a cast. So you have 3 pieces of evidence out of one alleged trackway. And then with, as Daniel, I don't need to really explain the DNA stuff. You could even try to find some eDNA from that. So I think we're getting to the point where this stuff is so accessible to general people. It just needs a little bit of education. Maybe that's a direction we need to go in. But I think strictly when it comes to the visual stuff, I think it would have already, if it was already going to prove something, it would have, and I don't think it has. So with AI, it's not going to get any better, because it's one of those buckle up scenarios. AI is good for a lot of things, but there's going to be a lot of fakes, as we see that there has been since Photoshop days. I mean, it's only going to get worse. So maybe that's a little cynical, but I think there's areas where people can, as you know, citizen scientists, kind of improve on their own. So that's sort of my view on what maybe can be done.
I definitely think you're spot on. What say you, RPG?
Did I unmute it? Hold on.
Yep, you're good.
Hold on. Can you I'm so sorry. I didn't want to miss it for the world, if you can't tell. I already had to go wipe a poopy butt, which she swore I didn't go poo. I'm like, yes, you did. You just don't want me to know. And now this one's choking on applesauce. Great. What was the question again? And I'll answer it succinctly so these other brilliant men here can handle this.
Yeah, we'll let Shane pose his question to you again.
Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Basically, you know, with all the investigators, groups, individuals out there actively doing research, is there anything you personally would like to see within the organizations, the individuals, the groups implemented, something they can do going forward that might propel the subject a little bit more forward, if there's anything at all?
Well, I think we should invade academia and like take it over. Meldrum shouldn't be the only one, or there's a few people standing there. We need to encourage that more, and there should be a class on that somewhere. If you can study, you know, a rock star, a present rock star, Taylor Swift, you should be able to study cryptozoology in school. There's enough passion and momentum behind it. So I think that's where it is. We try to, how do you do that? You got to make it cool, which I think that's what we're trying to get people to get back into nature. So by saying, hey, yes, you've seen deer and bear in these, but this could be there, and this is exciting. It's like catching that big bass the first time, then you're hooked for life if you have moments. So anyway, I don't know. We got to get more people in the schools, because as much as I'm an anti-schooler, that's where they respect you and they pay attention, and I think that's what you're looking for.
I definitely agree, man. What say you, Tim Halloran?
Let me make sure I was off mute. For me, I think so from the folks I've talked to, there's there's more collaboration in this subject than we think, but it's not a collective group. I think if we could get more of a universal, just from possibly just from a think tank, just from people getting together more as a one unit, I should say. I think that'll help. Of course, funding's always a thing. And I think because what happens is, how many of us, and I'm not a researcher, obviously, but how many people are researching on their own, or even doing podcasts or writing articles? And if we took all that time that we're spending on doing individual things and just put it together, I think we could push things forward. It's at least my thoughts.
Very good. Joe,
Yeah.
Ron, do you guys have some collective thoughts on this? Individual thoughts? What do you guys think about it?
Collective is a good way to introduce it, because that's actually our research team's name is the Collective. And I agree with Tim. There needs to be more collaboration and more sharing of data, as well as probably a tuning of our lexicon. Anybody who's followed us long enough knows that we look into literally everything that gets sent our way, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think there needs to be a protocol. There's no protocols in any of this. There needs to be a standard agreed upon protocol that would help. That way we all know that we're speaking about the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. We're looking for the same thing. And you can adjust your data points to that. If I find something, I can share it with Ryan. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. The word needs to be there.
Yeah. Structuring of the lexicon, compartmentalization of certain things, get rid of terminology like woo, because it has such a strong derogatory context amongst the community at large, and start looking at things in a way, the way we classify it is subject A and subject B, Bigfoot or Bigfoot-like, and go from there. I think it's probably one of the biggest steps we could all take as a community together.
Very well said. I have personally been guilty of using the woo word. I've tried over the last probably 6 or 7 months, as I've talked to people and interviewed people, to move towards high strangeness, other words outside of woo, to try to facilitate that, because a lot of people listen to my show and I want to project the right thing into the community, because I too believe that we need to be collectively looking at this. I'm kind of answering the question already, but we'll get back to Mike in a second. But I think it's very important for us to be very collective in our studies. And I do think in some cases, we probably need to stay in our lane as well. If everybody's in their lane, but we're working together simultaneously, I think that's very important. And I wrote down protocol, as you said it. I was in law enforcement for 16 years, and we had standard operating procedures for everything we did. But the greatest thing that everybody was given as a police officer, and the one thing they really could never take away from us, was discretion. So everybody has the standard protocols, but every investigator has their own discretion to go out and do that and interpret those protocols in their own way. So, because when people say protocols, they feel like they're being put in a box or whatever. I don't see that at all, because it's just how it works. You have the protocols, and then you have the ability and the discretion to interpret those protocols and implement them in your own way, as long as you stay within that circle of where you're supposed to be playing. So I've now answered the question. So I'm going to let Mike answer the question, and then we'll get Daniel's thoughts on it before we move on.
Well, as I'm coming in here at the end, I mean, you guys are pretty much hit most of it, but I mean, the documentation is key, and thinking outside the box. Go talk to folks in other disciplines. Recently talked to art specialist on colors and stuff like that, because now you're not always going to interview a witness that's going to see the same colors that you are. You're going to find folks with visual impairments and everything else. The folks that you're going to talk to are going to see things at different times. So yeah, taking the quote unquote woo element, but everybody has something to offer. Now, be that, the garbage man picking something up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or an artist, they're going to see something a little bit different. So a standardized form, a PDF, something that's searchable, not a lot of folks that go out, document, and documentation, something that's a searchable database is so important. Building a PDF or something that you can share amongst your friends, or like I said, you guys have brought up, we can share around the base. I've done some color stuff that we can share across the world. It's a standardization, and the standardization is so important. Simply carrying a standardized tape measure, I mean, that's so important that we're really missing out on a lot of those things. So
very good point, Daniel. We saved the youngest and most knowledgeable for last. You get to speak on this question. What do you think about it, man?
So I think one thing that we touched on was working as a team. I think is the most important key, and I think getting other people involved. So kind of the younger kind of generation and bringing them up to kind of help research this topic may give us an answer. And I think having more and more people involved will kind of push this a bit further. I think as RPG said, helping Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum and kind of all those kind of huge researchers. We've got a great team here, and I think that's one key. I then think another key would be, like as Alex said, eDNA is a brilliant tool to use, and then I think to really open up and to open to more everyone using eDNA and everyone using kind of casting footprints and everyone learning how to be out in the forest, and then it may give us an answer at the end.
Very well said, my friend. We all kind of stuck to the protocol, except for me, of course. That's my nature. So we'll try to stick to that going forward. I'll remind myself as we go around. So, Alex, we're going to shift over to you, man, and we're going to field your question next for the group.
Oh, okay. This is all right. So this is kind of just a pretty generic question, but I'm wondering if everybody has a personal favorite sighting or encounter that they've researched, whether or not you've personally looked into it or been told. You know, if it's a super long story, I get it, but just kind of abbreviated, I suppose, for maybe your favorite investigation of a particular incident or anything along those lines.
I think that's an awesome question. Let's, like you said, let's abbreviate it and maybe give a little bit of the context and then what the outcome of that investigation was. I think everybody would be interested in hearing. Let me unmute the man of the hour, RPG. What do you say, man?
Well, I'd love to go into the PG film, because after like deep diving into that, which all of us absolutely have, and you're not left going, it could go either way. These are exceptional men that could have faked it, or they actually could have got it done. I'll just leave that out there because it's not good to crush people's, most beautiful dream. But for me, we had a Class A sighting right here. Talk about terminology and some things we can use to communicate better. But Class A sighting on the property, Mrs. saw it, and that we had just moved in. I'll make it a really short story and just say, don't get dogs. They don't like them. Because it came around and it was like that 2 weeks of high strangeness. And yeah, she saw it. She said, there's a man over there. And then when I went and measured it, this thing was over 9 feet. And tall and thin, reddish brown, and moved so fast and so smooth, she thought it was on a dirt bike. So why this is a nice small story is the only nice footage we have out of Starkey Park. And where I live in this little, if this was an X-ray show, I'd say the penis of the park. But I live in this small little island at the end where all the nature pours to and follows the river before it becomes the mass. So it's an interesting little point. Anyway. But yeah, so she saw it there, and then she also saw something small in the tree, which she said, if you told me there were sloths here in the woods, then that's what I saw in the tree. But it moves so quick, and sloths don't move fast, obviously. So anyway, I think that's the most fascinating one. And the video out of the park is of a very tall, not your normal jack, like, oh my God, look at this football player, Squatch, a tall, skinny, thin one, which would make more sense in a hot climate. But so that's it, man. That kind of wowed me. And then we got dogs, and I'm like, damn it, because everything, the turkey, the deer, everything has been pushed back. So anyway, that's my advice and my story. Thank you.
Awesome. What about you, Tim Halloran? What say you?
I would say, because I've talked to a bunch of people. One of the most fascinating report stories that I heard. It wasn't a video, but it was Kathy and Bob Strain and a couple other folks, daytime in southeast Oklahoma, as what most folks know is known to be Area X. Well, they had a group sighting in the daytime. They saw two creatures and chased these creatures and could describe speed, muscle movement. Kathy actually chased them first. And to me, I mean, we have to take any visual sighting, could be subjective because we all see things, hear things, smell things differently, size, coordinates, distances. But when you have four people that see the same thing during the day, to me, that's just fascinating. I mean, how can you say all four of those people did not see what they saw? So that's the one that kind of sticks out for me on the top of my list.
Yeah, I could definitely see why. It's odd to have more than one person that actually is involved in a sighting. When you can get 3-4 people like that and multiple people, I think it's absolutely fascinating. Let's go to Joe and Ron. What say you guys on it?
I think our favorite investigation is easily agreed upon because we've been asked this question a few times, and that would be the Wanberry site. And it's for multiple reasons. There's been tons of data that's been retrieved from this site. It's still an active area. It's got hundreds and hundreds of acres of wilderness, and it started off with a report that had been sent in to us, and the witness was terrified, experiencing PTSD, and this is a Marine veteran who has issues from prior service anyway, but this is shook her to her core. She had a sighting up on a power line cut after having a traumatic breakup, and was up there crying and wondering, just crying out up on top of the mountaintop, just trying to get away from everybody and the kids and whatnot. And she had this sighting. It freaked her out. She got to the point where she wouldn't let her kids play outside. She wasn't going out and exercising and walking and hiking the property anymore. And she reached out to us, and we went out there. We investigated. We found a trackway while we were there. We cast prints, and we worked with her to the extent to where she was actually able to. She's like, "Well, I'll tell you where it was. I'm gonna set on my porch, and you guys can go do your thing." And then it went from sitting on the porch and talking to us to, "Well, do you care if I walk with you?" And she's like, "I don't want to be on camera. I'll pull my hood up, and you can go do whatever you need to do." And then adventuring out with us, we showed her what sign was, how to do simple tracking, and then explained to her what was going on, explained to her what the data was revealing at that point. And then by the end of the day, which was around a 7-8 hour trip, she had come around to the point where she now had caught the bug. She went from being terrified and unable to go out and walk her own property to becoming one of the most valuable assets of our team now.
Yeah. She's documented multiple accounts up there of what seemed to be Class A, or I would say Subject A and Subject B phenomena.
Some of the best orb photos
amazing.
I've ever seen.
Never seen
geometry within the orb photos, and unrelated to Bigfoot, but just some really strange stuff goes on.
It's a weird place.
Yeah,
just a weird place.
It definitely sounds like it is. What about you, Mike? What is your either encounter or investigation that you were involved in? What's been your favorite or most interesting, man?
Man, I've got two to kind of bounce on top of each other. But I'd probably go to the privilege I had with Joe Schneider. For those guys that knew Joe, he took me to his location that he had his sighting, and myself and my research partner were the first ones to get a chance to get back in the woods with him to that location since he had his encounter. And having that honor to get out there, and there's enough sightings in that area that really go through, and just to have that honor of being with him in that area was really interesting. because I ended up doing some other research not within 5 miles of where he had his location, or he had his sighting, where there's another sighting. And that individual who took us to that piece of property had his sighting in South America. So both those guys were Navy or military veterans. So it was really interesting to hear their perspective and to watch the reactions, their physical trauma. So the honor of both those gentlemen sharing their stories, but Joe especially, the man was awesome, and I do miss him. So
I second that. One of my favorite people in Bigfoot, Ristall, I put it up there in Joe's honor. Don't sweat the petty stuff. Don't pet the sweaty stuff. That was how Joe signed off his show every week. That's how I signed off my tribute show to Joe. So we had to put that out there for him. I'm going to go ahead and take this before we throw it over to Daniel. I tell you, I think probably for me, I'm almost 500 episodes into the show at this point, and I've talked to a ton of people with a bunch of interesting experiences and encounters. But I think for me, it was this past October, I was up at Radium, and I was out with Todd Standing, and we were doing some investigating out there. And I think it was our second or third night there. I was there. It was just me and Richard and Kyle Deshane, a father and son duo. And Richard had about a 3:00 in the morning experience where he stepped outside the camper to go take care of his business. And he saw this huge dark figure that was standing probably, I think we marked it off as about 20, 25 feet away from him. And he couldn't see very well. He didn't really know what he was looking at. He figured out it wasn't a bear, and then this thing disappeared. And we got up the very next morning, and if you guys have looked at it, I've got a video here somewhere on the Sasquatch Odyssey YouTube channel, and I've talked about it on the show in the past, but I got to go over there in the area where this thing was standing, literally probably, 6 to 8 hours after this happened. And I actually got to put my feet in the impressions where this thing stood 20 feet away from this camper. So, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest moments for me. Was him seeing something was great. I trust him wholeheartedly. This guy has no reason. He has no dog in the fight to lie to me about an experience. But then to have the physical evidence that was left behind with these big impressions in this spang of moss it was just overpowering for me. It just solidified, and I was able to check all the boxes and say, he can't definitively say he saw a Sasquatch, but I don't know. Once you check those boxes, right, you go through the totality of the circumstances and say, what could it have possibly been? Was it a deer? Probably not. It certainly wasn't a person. It wasn't a raccoon. It wasn't a squirrel. You're only left with so many things. And that was really, to be able to do that in such a quick amount of time after it happened. I mean, that's almost impossible to do. Like, I was literally sleeping right there. And then 6 hours later, I'm standing in the spot where this Sasquatch was standing. That's pretty powerful for me. So that one's always stuck out because it was most recent. That was back in October of last year. And I was right there, Johnny, on the spot. So what say you, Daniel? What about you, sir?
Before I say mine, I'm not sure Shane has said his.
Oh, yeah. Good call. See, that's why we have two professional hosts here. Shane, why don't you go ahead, sir? I'm sorry I left you behind.
For me, basically, my original experience in 2011, Mount Hood, my 2-night experience, my sighting out there solidified the existence of Sasquatch. That aside, I have so many favorites. And for me, it's more like the collective. When things you start seeing patterns of predictability or patterns within individual sightings. RPG talked about this reddish colored thin one. I've heard that multiple times, especially down in Oregon and parts of Western Washington, this reddish colored, tall, thinner style one. And there's an area down in Southwestern Washington for the last 20 years plus. There was an individual spotted as what you call like a juvenile, kind of a grayish color. And police officers have seen it. Timber cruisers have seen this thing. People driving have seen it, and it's grown. It's gotten exponentially bigger. It's grown over these 20 years in this one particular area. I mean, it's a vast area. And so it's really, whether it's the Patterson-Gimlin film, the Paul Freeman stuff, it is the collective. It's everything that I love. It starts to paint a picture that, like you say, you can see commonalities and similarities with a lot of these reports. And I've been investigated many. I've talked to hundreds of witnesses, like many of you guys have. And it's really like the whole combination of them all. I will tell you real quick, one of the neatest investigations I did was with David Ellis of the Olympic Project, and there was an individual, and it was an area where this Sasquatch that she had seen while driving, her and her husband, and massive thing, didn't go away. It stayed around her house for months. In fact, she would see it periodically looking from the tree line up at her house, and she had these big windows with no curtains on, and her husband would leave for a week or two out of town. He worked and traveled. And what was fascinating about that was we would find tracks. We did collect audio. So it wasn't just this sighting. There was actual physical evidence, audio recordings. I fortunately, I never, I spent nights on this property, even talked to a contractor who didn't know anything about this property or the Sasquatch in the area. He was working on the roof and saw this thing one day walking alongside a fence. He had no idea about anything going on that property, and he was shaken, stirred. In fact, it got so bad, this lady ended up selling her house. I mean, she moved. She actually moved to Arizona from Washington. So it's stuff like that that I really find intriguing. But within everything that was going on in her property, there was a lot of similarities to other situations. Like I find it fascinating when a house is vacant or a cabin is vacant for years, and then all of a sudden people move into there or come back, and all of a sudden they're getting weird stuff happening. They're seeing a Sasquatch, or they're getting stuff thrown at their house. I see a lot of like a lot of similarities with that stuff. That Sasquatch has probably been around that area, noticing that no one's been there, and all of a sudden someone's now residing there. They're fixing up the house. They're planting an apple orchard. Over the years, I've seen a lot of similarities with that. And so that's just one of the little things, but there's just too many good reports out there and stories and encounters. It's just a collective. I love piecing stuff together, every little piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, it's what it keeps me coming back, man. It's all the little nuances and all the things in everybody's stories, the similarities, the things that make you go, I've never heard that before. It's all what excites me and keeps me coming back. Now, Daniel, we'll save the best for last. What about you, sir?
So obviously, my absolute favorite would be the Patterson Gimlin film. It got me interested from when I first started watching Expedition Bigfoot and that. And then I would possibly then say the Paul Freeman footage was very, very good. I've had some good chats with Michael, and I think they're both amazing. I would possibly then say my favorite kind of let's say Bigfoot experience, I would say, would be when we came across kind of a odd print that then turned out to be kind of ridiculous DNA, I'm going to say. And I think that would have to be my kind of top one. Not saying that that's Bigfoot, but I would say those my top three, I would say.
I think that's a pretty good top three, my friend. All right, it is time for the man of the hour to ask his question. What say you, RPG? What you got for us, man?
Talking about an adventure coming up, there's just a lot. Who do you trust, right? I feel like everything we've ever been taught is a lie, and then as an adult, you realize that, and then you rebuild your education and your foundation. So I want to go underground. I know there's lots of woods to run, but when you're in an area where you're more surrounded, I think they go underground. And so my question to the team is, one, does that have any validity to you? And two, what kind of technologies can we use? Has LiDAR improved? Are there new drones and stuff that could actually safely take us into these areas? Now, don't get me wrong. I think if they are underground, they just move a 400-pound boulder in front of a crack and we're not going to find them. But if we have the technology that can see what is beyond, then, Anyway, I'm just curious, very curious about underground. And I was wondering what you amazing gentlemen think as well.
All right, up first is Tim Halloran. What say you on the underground stuff, man? I've been chomping at the bit to answer this question. So what say you?
Yeah, great. Throw me up there first. I think anything's possible. I think some of the challenges I have, I think there's more space. There's tunnels everywhere, or cave systems, not tunnels. Cave systems everywhere. I just think it's RPG. I think it's something that's not talked about enough. And from a technology standpoint, that's probably out of my realm of expertise of what we can do. But there's got to be a way we can do anything. I mean, we're from a mechanical and a scientific standpoint, we should be able to find ways to get drones down there, or just get ways to get and explore them. I guess my questions always is if they are underground, which is very possible, how far are they? Because you would figure they'd have to they would want to come in and out pretty quickly for food, water, etc., all the things you need to survive. And so they wouldn't. How deep would they be in a cave system? And then obviously you'd have to start exploring how they see, and can they? And some of these are questions more than answers. Can they adapt from being inside a dark environment into a light environment? Or if not, are they more nocturnal for that reason too? So I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but because I have tons of questions about it myself.
I think that was more questions than answers, but we will definitely let you slide. What say you, Joe and Ron, on the question of subterranean Sasquatch?
Well, we are from West Virginia. It is the land of probably the most abandoned coal mines on the East Coast, and the majority of them are not sealed off. It's extremely probable that these things are at least using them as winter shelters or severe weather shelters, if not permanent shelters. And when it comes, that's just my opinion. They're there, so why not use them? If these are a creature with any kind of intellect that is as smart as we say they are and behaves as human-like as we say they behave, then why not use what's there? Why not be resourceful? And as for the technology, you've got that.
The technology, you're going to need something like ground penetrating radar. You're going to need some kind of experimental technology like it doesn't even exist as far as I know. Something that would generate an extremely low frequency, ELF waves, basically. You're talking about stuff the government's got, but we don't have that on a consumer level right now. And I guess tinkers could possibly come up with something like that. Give me another 10 years, I might be able to make one, but you'd probably be able to buy one by then. But that's what you're looking at. You need something that can go through a lot of rock, if that's where they're at.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Doug Hajicek's probably got one of those things in his basement right now, waiting to pull it out. So, like the mad scientist that he is. I don't know. What say you, Mike? Oh, go ahead.
If you look at some of the stuff that I think it was China, the Takara Toys, the people who make Transformers, the Transformer toys, they just made a rover camera and you can buy a copy of it yourself, but it's a Transformer toy. I mean, it takes minds like that, like Doug's, to create some of this technology that can deploy in strange and bizarre environments.
Strange and bizarre. Connected to Doug Hajicek. That's amazing. What say you, Mike? What do you think about the subterranean Sasquatch, sir?
I'm always on that lookout. I definitely, in my area, I've got a lot of waterfalls. There's a lot of stuff back behind the waterfalls. So there are some FPV drones that are out there that have multispectral cameras, thermal cameras. The Avanti there is a caged drone that you can fly into tight spaces. It's a first-person viewer, so you can get in there, and it's a lot of fun to fly and bounce off of walls and everything else, and it'll kind of rewrite itself. There are some small robot cameras that are out there, a lot more for SWAT teams, but there's some little kid ones that are out there that'll give you cameras. They've got track systems, so you can get them in. The LiDAR systems are really come down in price, where you can go on and buy those things yourself through like DigiKey and that, and build your own additions to your drones. So under probably $5,000, you can kind of put your own little LiDAR drone or multispectral or thermal drone together and run them. For work, I use drones all the time. So that stuff is available. I'm not really that experienced with the LiDAR stuff, but getting some of the LiDAR things that are available, using those 3D scanning apps that we're using on our phones, or buying some of the more expensive ones. I mean, you can scan an area for that depth, and I'll always throw that back to Joe and Ron when it comes to the 3D stuff, because they spend more time on engineering. But the kits are out there. I've got a robot kit that's in the shop over here that it's simple, but getting a small, setup and putting the cameras on there, you can do under, at a decent price. But those scans are out there. If you get on some of your state websites, a lot of states have gone through and done LiDAR scans of the environment. I know we have here in New York. It's just finding somebody that knows how to read those LiDAR things. So the stuff is there. It's available. And just knowing where they're located and being safe about it too, though. I mean, it's a special specialty in its own. You don't want anybody getting trapped in a cage because, hey, we were talking about it. So talk to your search and rescue, talk to your geology, teams at your local college. You're probably going to find it. But a lot of that stuff is kept quiet, especially if there's mining rights. I know here in New York, you're not allowed to touch any of those minerals. They belong to the state. So any of that precious stuff. So a lot of those mines are kept really quiet because of commerce. So, but RPG, yeah, I'm kind of on that. Would like to look at some of those things. In the photo that's behind me, there's a lot of caves in that area. There's a lot of gorges, and there's a lot of sightings on the piece of property that's there. So it's always something to look at.
Very cool stuff. What say you, Shane? What do you think about the subterranean Sasquatch?
Yeah, I mean, as Tim said, anything's possible. I mean, absolutely. I personally just have a little bit of a hard time with it. Now, I'm up here in Washington, Western Washington. It rains a ton up here. The ground's always saturated. For a large cave system, and there are some like towards Mount St. Helens and stuff like that. I just with all the logging and stuff that goes on up in these areas where a lot of these encounters happen, it'd be very hard to have a cave up in these areas without being found, discovered, dug up at some point. Trees fall over, uproot. All the mines that I've been into up here, which are I'm a fairly thin guy. I can barely squeeze into because a lot of them have been blasted shut. There's no sign of anything even going in there other than pack rats and bats. But I just I think they could definitely in some parts of the country and in certain circumstances be utilizing caves. I mean, bears do, a lot of animals do. I don't know if they need to, at least up here in Western Washington and parts of Canada where there's so much woods. I mean, it's looking for a moving needle in a haystack. If they can be transitory, moving from elevation to elevation like the elk do. I hunt elk and I hunt bear and I hunt a lot of animals, and you just don't come across them sometimes. They're at different elevations. They smell you. They know you're there. I don't think Sasquatch has a hard time hiding. And if this nest area we've been working on for years is an area where they periodically build nests above ground. I just don't see a need for caves unless they're in areas where there are, like you guys were talking about, cave systems, mines. Then why not? And then also you would have to have a lot of tunnels, I would assume. It's to go in a cave. It's kind of like you're trapped. I mean, that's it. It's like climbing a tree. It's only one way up and one way down. A lot of these cave systems are one way in and one way out. So I just don't think they're gonna put themselves in a vulnerable situation where they can be trapped. Do they make mistakes? Absolutely. Do they use caves? Probably. I just don't know if they're living in them more than they're just utilizing them. But I'm not claiming to know anything. I think it's a very high possibility. It's something definitely to look at for sure. And then the technology aspect was pretty much covered here by these guys that are better spoken on it. I think the technology is catching up. It's becoming cheaper and more affordable. If there is a cave system or somewhere of interest, obviously you put cameras up, but I think one of the least intrusive things you could do is just play some audio nearby and see if you can pick up something going in and out of that area or in that area that might point towards that cave or tunnel being something that they might be utilizing or something's utilizing. So just my 2 cents.
There you go. What say you, Alex? What do you think about the caves things, man?
Yeah, this is actually something I have a lot of thoughts about. I've been really deep diving into abandoned mines and caves. I'm working on a new series called Strange Places for Small Town Monsters, and it's non-Bigfoot stuff. So I've been going into a lot of weird directions, including abandoned mines, all up and down the Appalachians and caves. So I think I agree most with Shane on the Bigfoot question when it comes to caves and mines, but I think everyone brought up some fantastic points. So, for example, I'll kind of explain a little bit about my position, but where I live here in the Northern Appalachians, New Hampshire, we're at the tail end. It's a lot of granite up here. We don't have a lot of natural cave formations. They just don't happen. Most of what we have are rock overhangs. Like I've even got one on my property here where it's a glacial erratic that was deposited during the melting of the ice in the glaciers. And it's just a giant boulder in the middle of the woods. And it's a little overhang, and porcupine actually currently lives in there because I see his poop everywhere. They live by the, they poop where they eat and sleep kind of thing. If you've ever run into a porcupine den. So we have a lot of these overhangs. There's just not big cave systems. I could imagine something like a Sasquatch or really any other kind of creature, bears, other critters use these overhangs as like a temporary winter shelter. Absolutely. But then as soon as you get down to, say, New York, Pennsylvania, going down the Appalachians, you start seeing a lot more of that limestone and some of the other geologic formations that create these impressive cave systems. I've been in some of them in Joe and Ron's neck of the woods there in West Virginia, that you could just get lost in these caves, how deep they is. And I think if something like a Sasquatch is utilizing these caves, you have limited light in there. Even for nocturnal animals, they still need some kind of light to kind of use that to help with their night vision, at least from what I understand about tapetum lucidum, which I'm not a biologist. I don't know that much about it. I'd have to refer to somebody who kind of knew what they're talking about. But abandoned mines are very dangerous places. I can't talk a lot publicly about this because I'm working with some people on this topic, and I'll be doing a documentary about coal mining in certain parts of the Appalachians. So I've got to be careful what I say, but and I won't even give a region, not to get anybody in trouble. But from what I understand, there's a lot of these mines that you actually go into, and there's something called black damp, which is an asphyxiant, which will basically kill you within a few minutes. It's some kind of a chemical release from some of the geologic formations in there that, unless you have some sort of a detector, and I think somebody in the comments even had said, buy yourself a gas detector. I think Jimmy T had said that in the comments earlier, and I noticed that. And a lot of these people I'm talking to, they do this kind of stuff a lot, so they have this sort of equipment. A lot of people exploring these places. So and what's interesting is they'll find bones of bears and other animals that have gone into these mines and have died and are just stuck in there because they couldn't find a way out. Maybe they kept going in, there was a threat or something, and they kept going in and they couldn't find a way out. A lot of times you don't know where, especially if it's a natural cave formation, unless it's been mapped, you don't know where it's going to lead to. I watch a couple of these guys that are total lunatics down there in Georgia that go through those tiny little caves. I mean, talk about claustrophobia, trying to go through some of this stuff. And they don't know where they're going to end up. But the technology aspect's really interesting. You do have LiDAR, penetrating LiDAR that's been used to map caves out. You even got found an article by University of Virginia, or James Madison University, excuse me. Students were using this technology to map these caves out. So the technology is there. Again, I think, as other people have brought up, to what extent it's accessible to the public is definitely a question. But I would say, to kind of bring my whole spiel back, I would imagine some mines, some caves, maybe in more remote areas, because especially in all up and down the Appalachians, excluding my area here, from New York down to Georgia, you have, as Joe and those guys talked about, so many abandoned mines. Can imagine maybe using them to some extent opportunistically, but I don't imagine going from point A to point B, again, because let's say a Sasquatch goes in there and runs into some black damp. I mean, they just die down there, and then one of these YouTube guys goes in there, comes across this. That hasn't happened. So yeah, I think I'm a little more skeptical on that, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, especially in an opportunistic sense. So hopefully that, again, I've been thinking about this topic a lot because I've been going into this direction for my other series. So I'll be going underground here soon. So I'll let you guys know if I find anything.
There, you heard it here first, people. Alex is going subterranean. This is actually something that came up on the last roundtable that I was a part of. I was a guest over on Calling All Beings with DJ and those guys on a roundtable a couple of months back with Doug and a couple of other folks. And one of those people was Scott Tompkins from the Bigfoot Mapping Project. And Scott is really interested in caves and getting as much data as possible. And he brought it to my attention. I had no idea that there's a federal law that prevents from publishing locations to a lot of these caves that we would love to know where they're at. And that was one of the questions that Scott had. and he was talking specifically about, I can't remember exactly what the law was. And, it's always passed under the guise of safety, which I get on a lot of levels, and I told him that's one of the things that is easiest to introduce in whatever local or state government it is. If it's for safety, if somebody dies, then you can close it off. But I think it has other connotations attached to it. We won't get into that. That's another conversation for another day. But I think it's interesting that during that conversation, we talked more about the colder climates and what do Sasquatch do if they are apes. And typically apes aren't found in very cold climates. Minnesota, for example, it could be 30 below in some of these cases. A cave would probably save a Bigfoot's life, a Sasquatch's life, if they were able to crawl into it and it's 40 below and the wind chill is -60 or whatever. I think it's more along those lines that they might be seeking shelter, very much like some of you guys have said. I don't think it's something they're doing year round. I don't think they need them year round. So that's just my 2 cents, but it doesn't matter what I think. What do you think, Daniel? What do you say about the subterranean Bigfoot, man?
So I would say that they now them living in it, I would agree with some of these guys on here that they it is a way that they can kind of just they'll get caught. Let's say a kind of mining team go in there and they have no exit. So I would say possibly they can live at it. I don't think they do all the time, but I think they use it as a travel system to travel through areas unseen, and that's possibly how sometimes they just disappear. They go into a cave to kind of get away from that human life, and then they come back up in a different area. And there are kind of loads of, when you look at the geology of some of the areas, like my area, there's gaps and kind of that they can have that then get through. But I think living in there, I'm not sure. And then going on to kind of the technology side, I think we are evolving very, very quickly, and I think we are one day going to get a piece of tech that will be able to kind of have a look at all the caves. And then I think, but as we have with the LiDAR and all that kind of equipment, I think we have the technology in front of us. Just don't think a lot of people are implementing it in the field.
I definitely agree with that. Great question, RPG. No pressure, Tim, but it is now time for your question. How are you going to top RPG's Subterranean Sasquatch? Wait a minute. I think Joe's got something to say here. Let me and let him save the day here. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, guys. We're so sorry, but we're actually in Mothman territory right now up here in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. We're doing some work, and the men in black are getting ready to yank us out of this room. So we've got to jet. I'm so sorry that we got to go, but it's that or never be seen again. So thanks for having us, everybody. We love you guys. And say wow.
Thanks, Ron.
See you guys.
I had one more quick thought about subterranean Sasquatch before we move on.
Absolutely, sir.
Really quickly. This is something I forgot to mention, and this is just goes anecdotally to the idea of using underground or kind of hidden places. So a couple of years ago, Seth and some of the rest of the STM crew, they interviewed a guy in Pennsylvania who had a sighting, or not a sighting, had an experience that he believed was Sasquatch inside of an abandoned turnpike tunnel. So throughout Pennsylvania, there's a bunch of these abandoned highway tunnels that are literally in the middle of nowhere. I might be going to some of them soon. You may see a video on that, just putting that out there. But one of these ones, which is now actually used for some kind of race car testing, at the time when the guy had the sighting in the early 2000s, he was hiking along, he was a backpacker and he was hiking in this area. And we have the interview with him on YouTube, but he was inside one of these tunnels because the trail had been across. He's like, oh, let's check it out. And they were using it for salt storage at the time for winter. And they're in the middle of this tunnel, and they say they heard what sounded like wood falling, and then they got roared at by something that was just unbelievable. They felt it vibrating their chest. The stereotypical kind of audio experience somebody has, which I've heard a dozen times. Basically, even my buddy Brian in the chat, who had an encounter roared at. You feel it vibrating the chest. So that was an interesting one. And now, of course, that tunnel it's privately owned and it's being used for race car testing. But I think if that indeed was a Sasquatch, which we don't know if it was, but the guy seemed to believe it was, maybe that just goes to the opportunistic thing, maybe moving through a tunnel and someone happens to go in there by accident. So just something I forgot to add in during my initial point about subterranean Sasquatch. So RPG, you got us rolling on this topic.
Go on, RPG.
Can I drop in real quick? First of all, this is wonderful. I hang with kids all day, so to be around you gentlemen, I wish we all lived close. It'd be really rad. So infrasound, low frequency sound, if anyone can answer it, is I think that would be optimal down there, because if you have this gap and then there's a large cave on the other side that's been blocked, or whatever, you'd be able to use that sound. So if we were in the cave system, because they have tech now that it's down to like $500, you can get a mobile unit that you can attach to your computer and actually record. I'm right on the fence of getting one, right? But using that in the tunnels, I mean, you pick that up, or even just pick that up in the woods in a place where there's no gators, there's no hippos, there's no, what I mean? You're in the Pacific or whatever. Hold on, guys, one sec. Boom, you just found another angle for proving the existence of an unknown animal. So I'm really fascinated about bringing infrasound down there. I think in terms of consumer reach, that's the closest we're going to get to big tech at this point. Hey guys, wow, I'm in charge, by the way, in my house, not them. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. But yeah, infrasound is where I would like to experiment and dabble with. So any advice from any of you gentlemen would be much appreciated.
Joe and Jesse from Hellbent Holler have one of those portable units. It's a nice sized little unit. It's not too big. It's really easy to move around. So,
well, there was recently this scientist wife and husband team in Africa. They wrote a paper. This was like end of last year, which I read. I kind of having a little back and forth with them about it, but they basically nonchalantly said that they believe that gorillas have produced infrasonic vocalizations that they called the Barry White effect, which I came across this paper, and I think I probably shared it to Mike and Shane at some point in like a group chat. I don't remember. I know it's been a while since I shared it, but yeah, it was nonchalant. They basically said they believe that male gorillas create a Barry White effect, which affects the female gorillas with kind of interesting, because the only other primates, to my knowledge, were the lesser, really small ones that might have used infrasound. It wasn't really known, but yeah, that was. I can link that article. I think I have it somewhere if somebody's curious or wants to read about it. They just nonchalantly messaged it. I'm like, hey, slow down. Can we talk about this a little more?
You can't just throw Barry White out and mic drop and leave the room, man. Detail.
The question: what he was searching for, Barry White or for the infrasound stuff?
That's the best thing said yet. I love that. Thank you. I can't wait to read that.
Something very, very briefly, and I noticed a comment in chat that was very, very intriguing to me. What do you guys think of this?
Oh, do you think that the underground is where they take the ones that die? That's an interesting question. That would go a long way in why we don't find the bodies. But actually, in actuality, if they were taking them into caves, it would be a lot easier for us to find the bones, because they would probably fossilize in a cave and be there for us to get later on down the line. But I don't know. Do we want to go around the horn and answer that really quickly? What do you? Let's start with RPG and let him go there.
I think they give the body to the porcupine gods, and the porcupines devour and eat that thing damn quick, combined with the rest of the forest and the way basically rain becomes acid and melts it down. I think it's a very quick turnaround for the most part, and they would know that. But is anything possible? Do they have a giant burial elephant / Bigfoot graveyard down there? Sure. And I hope Alec finds it and he calls us all immediately and goes, get your ass here, because it's go time. And I'm out.
I'm definitely flying in for that. What say you, Shane?
Yeah, I don't think they have a need to bury him. The porcupine gods, that was awesome. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of shed hunting, and I recently was out looking for sheds, and man, it's amazing how quickly animals will tear apart a shed. Like, I've already noticed, a shed that could be a 4-pointer, and it's being nibbled on and slowly, and before long it'll be gone. Well, bones are the same way, As RPG said, the acidity in the soil and the rain and the deep dark places where I think these things go and pass away. It's like a dog or a cat. Any animal that knows they're on their way out that's injured, they're going to find a spot where they're not going to be pestered with, they're not going to be eaten alive. They want to die peacefully. And I tend to think Sasquatch is the same way. And then nature takes over. I mean, I've seen elk carcasses disappear in a span of a couple of days, just completely gone. I mean, obviously animals are dragging them away and eating, but where'd the bones go? I mean, yeah. So everything, especially with the forests and stuff, nature takes care of it real quick. It's just natural.
Anybody else have anything on that before we move on to Tim's question? Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, just I would agree with Shane. I think and a good example of this is the largest supposed ape in human history, or in history, right? Which is the Gigantopithecus, which Grover Krantz believed might be a likely candidate for Sasquatch. Obviously that's kind of a classic theory. It's not a new one by any means, but that ape, gigantic, supposedly, right? Very closely related to orangutans, at least from what we think now, in the Pongid kind of line. The only fossil evidence we have that it even existed were some teeth and some bone fragments, and that was because they were in caves. And porcupines ate the rest of the bones, but these apes lived in those kind of the bamboo forests and that very kind of tropical area in southern China and into what's now Indochina, I guess, kind of Vietnam, Laos, those kinds of areas. Those are environments where fossilization doesn't really happen unless you're in a specific circumstance like a cave, which would preserve fossils. And in this case, the only reason those bones were even in there is because porcupines dragged some of them in there and were eating the rest. And I guess that's all that was left, at least from my knowledge of it. So I think if that were going on, we probably would have found some kind of evidence of that in North America, maybe. But I think Mike probably has something good to say on this too.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing to look at is you can get online. You can find the information out on the forensic science body farms, where they actually go out and stake different types of bodies out in the field and how they decompose. I mean, there's plenty of studies on that. And even our ancestors that we're finding, those that they are finding in caves, you're finding actually 3 and 4 different sections of the lineage stacked on top of each other in some of these cave systems. So, I mean, that's a big thing there, is really take a look. Again, getting outside the box. It's not always the Bigfoot subject that we're going to find our answer in. We really need to take a look at some of that forensic science stuff that's out there for that data collection. And I mean, if you're not too weak of heart or stomach, check some of the body farm stuff out, because some of those videos are out there and they use those things for a lot of forensic science stuff.
Very good point. What say you, Tim Halloran? You have not got off the hook, my friend. What is your question?
All right. My first question was going to be, how many more kids is RPG going to have? No, seriously.
Pregnant again.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Going around the horn.
That's funny.
We've all been there, brother. Don't worry. Well, maybe not Daniel, but he's a little. But so, how convinced are you that something exists? Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it. And if it's not 100%, what makes you doubt on those days? Because I know, Brian, I've talked about those days. 5 out of 7 days you think they exist, and the other 2 days you question it. So that's my question for the group. Questions, 2-part.
Let's go straight to Mike. We'll just go around the horn here. Mike, what say you, man?
Well, I'm about 4 days out of the week that I am. It's not real, and 3 days of the week I am on the it's the real side of things. What keeps me going is the friends that I've met and talked to about their experiences and some of the stuff that's come to me through some folks. Folks like Joe that I've sat there, listened to him, my buddy Ray, and talking to the guys that were with him when he had his sighting. They had a full team of military guys that had their sighting, and those guys have come to me individually, telling me they're gonna, let me know about their story, about what happened, swearing on their families, their jobs, their careers, and putting that on the line. Those sightings, those reports keep me going. And then when I'm about ready to walk away, something in the universe gets slapped in my face, and I won't call it the woo stuff, but things are there. I mean, Alex and I were just down in Florida and had some friends come across stuff, but it's the hunt, and then you have gentlemen like Daniel working on the eDNA thing and what they might, the science experiments that are coming out there, or Shane and his crew up there up north and what they keep coming across. Shane and I have talks about what they have with their nests, and we've seen duplicate things like that on the East Coast. So when the data points hit, it keeps me going. But then there's days you're out in the woods and you're like, nothing's happened. And I spend, quite a few weeks a year in the woods, either up here in the Northeast or down in the Southeast. And it just, I don't know, it just keeps me going. But like I said, there's 3 out of the 4 days a week, I'm kind of like, well, we're going to grab this side of the house, but again, it's those witnesses that I've seen, that you can tell have had some sort of traumatic experience that I'm on the hunt to see if maybe we can help prove them. And I got a background in archaeology and anthropology as well, and law enforcement. So investigations and the data points are so important to me.
Excellent, sir. What say you, Shane?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm 100%. They're a real living, breathing entity out in the woods, or in parts of North America. Absolutely. Even if I didn't have my 2-night experience, which eventually I saw this thing, I'd probably be 90% that they were real. But now it's not even a question. The question for me is, how many are there out there? Where are they going? What are they doing? What are they eating? How do they survive? Where did they cross the Bering Strait, the land bridge? Where, those are the questions I have now. And I've spoken to, like I said, hundreds of witnesses over the years, from all walks of life, that describe the same thing that I experienced, and then, just the experiences I've had over the years. I don't have them all the time, very rarely. I mean, but you come across pristine track impression out there. You're in the middle of nowhere, and it's not just one. There's, you have the hair that's been identified as primate hair that lacks a medulla. I mean, it's primate hair. I mean, it is, and it's got those red pigmentations underneath the microscope, as we were talking about earlier about red. This cinnamon color. So there's no doubt they survived. I think the problem with a lot of anybody that to speak to Mike, I just don't think there's that many of them out there. I really don't. I don't think there needs to be. You look at a lot of primates, non-human primates, great ape stuff. They don't need huge numbers. They really don't. The Tapanuli orangutan discovered in Indonesia in 2017 blew Western science's mind. They had no idea in over 200 years of studying great apes that there was this 500 orangutan in this one area that the Aborigines, the people that lived there, knew about. They've been talking about it. Yeah, they're there. And Western science is like, nope, there's no way. Then a skull comes forward, and then you an expedition, a funded expedition to this area, and lo and behold, there is a whole new species of orangutan. What has the Native Americans been saying here in North America? The First Nations, the Sasquatch are there. Yeah. What does Western science say? No, it's impossible. They will be proven wrong one day, and people like your Jeff Meldrums and your John Bindernaggles and your John Mindzinskis and all these guys will be vindicated. But I think it's a numbers thing. I just don't think there's that many out there, and they generally avoid people like the plague, and so when you have an experience or an encounter, it's an amazing thing. But as an investigator and a researcher, my advice to people is, I don't do so much like ambulance chasing. If there's a report somewhere, unless it's got something directly involved with what the Olymp Project's doing, or it's an area of interest, that's awesome. Or unless it's really fresh, I'll take notes of that. But I think it's more important to stay in one area where something has occurred, whether you've had a sighting or there've been a lot of reports. If they've been there once, chances are they'll come back at some point in time, and you just need to learn that environment, figure out the travel corridors, figure out the food, figure out the weather patterns, and maybe you'll strike gold one day.
I love these answers. This is why you guys are absolutely the best panel, because everybody comes at this from a little bit of a different perspective, and I absolutely love it. Alex, what say you, man?
Yeah, this is a complex question. I think a lot of people grapple with. I think a lot of it's personal based. I mean, you talk to somebody like Shane who's had an experience. I mean, I've been to his sighting location. He's taken me there. We've camped there. I don't see why something like this wouldn't exist in an area like that. It's the Mount Hood Wilderness. I mean, it's beautiful, right? I know plenty of other people I've talked to. I've had the luck now to travel basically all across North America to look into this phenomena and see all the different types of environments, whether they're the swamps down south, the Appalachians, the Rocky Mountains, Canada, Alaska, whatever. Do I think they're in all these environments? Maybe, maybe not. I think some are probably more conducive than others. I mean, drive from the East Coast to Alaska like I did last summer, and you'll just be, I mean, it's frightening how much land is still up in, especially northern Canada and into Alaska, that nobody's there. I mean, everyone in Canada is up by the borders. So, and over the years, I mean, I've never had a sighting, so I can't say 100%. I lean very highly to that there is something. I mean, whatever it is, there is something going on that causes people for hundreds of years from different walks of life, from the highest education levels to the lowest education levels to no education levels, that are describing almost the same exact types of encounters that to me speak to some kind of consistency of behavior that would indicate a species. Like if you go anywhere in the world and run into people, they have the same types of behaviors generally, right? There may be cultural or ethnic differences, but we're still a uniform species, right? So you have these things over, I mean, recently I spent a bunch of time looking at reports from British Columbia from the 20s and the 30s and going back earlier when I was doing a British Columbia film after I traveled there. And I was running into these stories that you could put these up on Bigfoot Society, on Jeremiah's podcast, or on your podcast today, Brian. And they sound like so many of the encounters I've heard today, yet this was way before the internet, way before there was ever a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch topic. So yeah, I think, again, I mean, I haven't had a sighting myself. I've had a couple of experiences, a handful that I would describe as potential behavior. I couldn't say one way or another that they are 100% Sasquatch, but when you have what sounds like rocks being thrown at you and wood knocking type noises, and you're in the middle of a remote location in Alaska that you know there's nobody else there, it becomes difficult to square that away. Not to say I couldn't be wrong, but there's something going on. I mean, I couldn't tell you what it is. I'm just here to speculate, as I think all of us are. We don't know the answers, but to those that have had an experience, and I know plenty of people like Shane that have, I believe they had an experience. Mike talked about Joe. He had a very interesting experience as well. So yeah, I guess to kind of wrap it up, I do think there is something out there. There's something that's causing these experiences, people across a continent that are having eerily similar encounters that just defies logic, as to why would they make up the same. Why isn't there somebody seeing a Bigfoot dressed as a clown or something? If they're already making up these weird details, why are they so startlingly consistent, I guess, in a way? So yeah, that's sort of my take on it all.
Very well said, sir. Last but not least, RPG, what about you, sir?
Let me unmute. You guys kind of basically said it. Finding Bigfoot, one of my favorite jobs was when I would just sit there at the door and every single person coming to the town hall would come through me, and not everyone will be brave enough to get up and tell their story. You better damn well believe they tell me the story. And so I just sat there unknowingly at first being like, holy cow, this is the greatest collection of stories like ever. I mean, they're coming to me and I'm getting paid for this. Holy crap. So I would agree with everyone saying, you're telling me thousands of people are all just desperate for attention. Thousands of people got drunk enough to come lie to me. Thousands of people are classically trained Juilliard actors and actresses waiting to BS me. That should at least make you go, And then I've yet to meet a Native American tribe that doesn't have them in their oral history. So, I know we're meant to not see them and they're meant to be invisible, but guess what? They're not. And their foundation of wisdom is much older than mine. So once again, why wouldn't you believe that? And on top of that, yeah, just do a deep dive tonight on federal tracts of land and tell me that is not a game preserve for whatever. There could be dinosaurs out there and occasionally a petrodactyl flies out and one of us is lucky enough to take our head out of our butt, aka our phone, look up and record it. Because I don't know about you guys, I've had real experiences where I saw a UFO in LA, and I love UFOs. I love all this stuff. It's the coolest, most exciting thing ever. And I denied it 3 times in a row to my buddy. Nah, it's just a plane, because I was sucked into my phone like an idiot. And that's me. That's like you. And ever since that day, you say something weird, I'm on it. But even I was like, no. It's like I used to lifeguard, and that one time I had to make the big save. Everything went, it was like your adrenaline kicks in, everything's different. I don't know, man. It's very hard to have a coherent moment when a miracle happens in front of you. And anyway, but it's also completely memorable and something you can never shake. And when these people tell me those stories, I don't know. I lean toward it. And I've seen some stuff. I've had Class A sightings that were brief. And, you know, I'm not going to say 100% because I haven't had, you know, the Freeman where it just walks in front of me and I just want to call my mom and tell her I love her and she did a good job raising her son. So, you know, but I've also deep dove on all of the greatest footage. And I firmly believe that if we are brilliant enough to think of it, then we are brilliant enough to fake it. And so that will always give me that 1% until I have my patty, you know. That's it. Mic drop.
I think I'm definitely right there with you. As Tim said, he and I have had these conversations ad nauseum in the past about, and I've shifted a little bit to, I used to be about 5 days out of 7. Now I'm about 6.5 days out of 7 certain that something's there. And I tell you, it was because of some of the experiences that I've had here on our land. And then when I went up to Radium, I don't know what was throwing rocks at me 18 miles deep in the woods when nobody else was around. I don't know what was making the wood knocks. I don't know what was making those vocalizations, unless it was a Sasquatch. But again, I think I'll have to hold out just a little bit. My brain just will not allow me to 100% commit until I see it for myself. So I don't know. What about you, Daniel? What say you, sir?
So again, I think half the days a week I'm absolute real, and half days a week I'm like, I have no idea, possibly not. And say I haven't had a experience myself, but I would possibly say it's a one for if it's if, and say I was in the library yesterday and I was sat for probably about 2 hours reading through history books, looking for any kinds of history of these like 8 feet tall wild men, let's say, and we found a few things that kind of increased me a bit more. And I think going to kind of the States, I think there's more of a chance in some of the states over in America, and it's like say in the UK, I'm probably 5% that there's something here. I don't think so. But there is some weird stuff going on here. I think it again depends on where you are in the world, can kind of define where these creatures are. Say if you're in Washington, I think absolutely. So I think it's where I think. So yeah, that's kind of sum that up.
I'm right there with you, my friend. Mike, you get the honor of the last question of the day for the panel, man. What say you? What's your question for us?
What gets you guys to pick your location? And outside of the report, what draws you to a location?
Very good, simple question. Let's start at the top. I think I know Shane's answer, but let me go ahead and go to Shane first and let him start, and we'll go around the horn on this one.
Well, yeah, Brian, you're probably right. You know, a lot of times it's not about, you know, with the Olympic project, for example, this nest study area we've been working in was an area that we had picked out. We were led there, and then subsequently, having come across some stuff, we decided to set up base. I mean, this is the spot. We've been at it since 2015 in this one location. It's a very vast area, and we keep getting further and further out. Obviously, like we said, besides sightings and stuff, I like remote areas, but it's got to be also within reason, because, you know, we'd all love to be out there in the middle of nowhere doing this stuff all the time, but, you know, it takes time, travel, and so you gotta live within your means. You know, I'm up in Western Washington. To get up into the Olympics, it takes me 2.5 hours, you know, and so and I go as much as I can. I mean, but I have spots closer to home that are they're very valuable. But what I look for is just usually try to find a fairly remote area. And on top of that, real quick, it doesn't have to be a remote area. There's Sasquatch reports right upside towns, even backside of Seattle, Washington. But I just like those areas where I get away from humans and less contamination, less chance of being fooled or hoaxed. Those are big things for me. I like to find that those areas where, you always hear people go, oh, no one's ever been here. Or, if you're there, someone might have been there. But I like to get down to an area where the chance of someone being there is unlikely, or it's unlikely they've been there in a while, and it's unlikely they'll go there. Areas, obviously food and water sources. I like elevation changes, mountains. I really do believe Sasquatch is utilizing a lot of these mountains. I've taken too many reports where it's going up a hill and they're watching this thing and it gets up there so quick. And then when you try to follow it, you're stumbling over stuff, you're tripping, you can't, it's just a quick escape. Even the nest area we're in, there's quick escape routes, very sharp drops. It'll take me 20 minutes to get down, and probably these things mere seconds. So it's areas where there's a lot of cover, food sources, obviously, elevation changes. And then I look for like known animals. Can a bear survive here? A mountain lion, a deer, an elk. And sometimes, the best areas are where there are no reports, because it obviously takes a human and a Sasquatch, right? Just because there's no reports from one area doesn't mean there's no Sasquatch. It just means maybe nobody's going there and no one's seen one yet, And so it's really good to get out and find, kind of like these virgin areas. I think that those are important. And man, if more people did that instead of going to areas where there's been a report, start looking outside the box, thinking outside the box, well, this thing had to come from somewhere. Let me look at the map, well, there's no campgrounds here. Oh, it's just forests. But there's a creek, and there's a river, there's a lake. That's kind of what I do, and a lot of the Link Project members do. But a lot of cases, we're led to a location. Well, not so much now. We have 3 areas. We don't really, get out of those areas. We love them too much. And they seem to produce periodically. So sometimes you're just led there. But yeah, hope that worked for you, Mike.
Thank you. Yep.
What about you, Alex? What say you, sir?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I've got like a multi-tiered approach, I guess, to this, because, if I'm home here in the state of New Hampshire, as Cliff Bergman likes to say, the best places to go Bigfooting or to do your research are the ones that are easy to get to, right? I mean, it's accessible. If you're trying to do in and out all the time, twice a week, especially during COVID, during the initial kind of lockdowns, I was going out to an area that I had some experiences in almost every day, and it was something that I could drive to, after work. So, and I'm here in New Hampshire. It's the second most forested state in the U.S. after neighboring Maine. We've just got a lot of connecting to Canada, millions of acres of woods. When I'm around here, I kind of look at, well, okay, can this habitat support moose? Is there thousands of moose running around, largest animal in North America, basically. And I see a lot of other places that have moose, and that's sort of a biological metric I kind of like to look at, just because if it's supporting a 700 to 1,000 pound animal, and there's hundreds of them running around, I think it might be able to support the other ones, the smaller ones. So anything from Sasquatch size to bears, and then down from there. Of course, you need to have somewhat of a healthy ecosystem. So I guess locally, that's my approach. I look for those sorts of biological metrics. Obviously, water sources. Up here, you don't have to go very far without finding, a creek or a pond or a river. So there's a lot of water sources. It'd be different in a place, say, out west, where it's a little drier, maybe in the Rocky Mountains or something. But when it's come to like my Beyond the Trail approach that I've been doing now since 2021, that's kind of dependent. A lot of times I only have 3 or 4 days to go to a place. That's not a lot of time. So you've got to work with local researchers. I work with people who've had experiences. They take me where it's happened. Maybe like I was in the Honey Island Swamp in Louisiana last month. I was there last year as well, around the same time of year. And so water levels are high. Animals are moving in certain corridors. Speaking of corridors, I'll get to that in a second. But in the Honey Island Swamp, I went to an area where there was multiple experiences that happened to people that I had been in contact with, and kind of, hey, let's try this out. Let's see if we go in here and find any evidence of anything. And again, 3-4 days is really not a lot of time. I think typically, like what the Olympic Project does, what other groups have done, setting up more for a long-term time period, I think is probably more ideal. But a lot of times when I'm out there filming, I just don't have the time to do that. So I try to take as much of an approach. But like Mike had mentioned recently, we were in a corridor area in Florida where a buddy of ours, Matt Larson, has been hitting that area for 3+ years. And it says this is a choke point where you need to get from the animals, they all move from point A to point B to a larger habitat. They have to go through this 2-mile wide corridor. They have to. So why not focus on an area like that, catch something trying to come through? So Yeah, I think again, when it comes to when I select an area, it's a multitude of factors. Whether if it's something more local, or if I'm being directed there, or if I just sometimes I'll just look on Google Earth and be like, "This looks like a great spot." Maybe maybe there's no history at all. Like Shane said, there might not even need to be any reports. Go check it out, see if it might be viable, and you never know. I mean, some of the most random potential encounters I've had was backpacking in the high Uintas of Utah. We're just up in the mountains, and suddenly we're getting knocks and stuff happening and weird stuff. It's like we're just trying to get to this lake. We're hiking in the middle of the night. Like, that's all we're trying to do. So sometimes it can be random like that. But yeah, I don't think there's a set kind of method, just sort of different. I think it depends on the locations too.
What about you, RPG? What drives you to an area for research, man?
In this little point of land, so I'm stoked about, and I didn't expect that at all. That's like the dream of any squatcher, I think, and for sure. And I know when the storms come through, in my opinion, they use the river like a water slide, and they come cruising down because there ain't gonna be no humans out there. We're scared to death. They're catching food. I don't know. To them, I think we need to look at them like they are us. Like just really not try to put them in any other category and just go, what would you do? I'll tell you what I would do. If all of us were hanging in the woods, we're going to have some fun, son. We're going to have some fun. And I'm going to go, oh yeah, Shane, I bet you can't climb that tree in 5 seconds. And Shane would be like, your mom. And then he would go climb that tree in 4 seconds. And I just think if we look at them, because what we learn through play, right? They must learn through play. So in my opinion, the younger ones, which I think we're seeing much more of, especially daytime sightings. I mean, when did you sneak out when you were growing up, right? When your parents were asleep. Well, if they predominantly are awake at night, sleep during the day, that's when the teens are out running, right? I got this awesome start to a film that I want to share with you guys at some point that you'll appreciate. But anyway, cohabitation's bet, because what is it? Okay, let's just talk about nature for a sec. Minimalizing risk, right? Because if you get hurt as an apex predator, you're done. Or you're in severe trouble. So they want to minimize risk. So by cohabitating and showing that there is this standard, like I always do the same things. I feed the crows. The crows help protect my chickens from the hawks. Like they see that I'm not a threat. I believe I then have a better chance of them slipping up. And we'll call it slipping up because we had a gator living on our property for 1.5 years, which is an amazing story I'd love to get into for you. And nobody knew it was here. Not even the superstar redneck of the year 2001 to 2024. Like he had no idea. And it was literally in this tiny little hole right in his yard, a dinosaur. And we didn't know. There's stories of lions in the Serengeti, like living right with Maasai tribes all around them that hunt and kill them for rites of passage. They don't know they're there because they adapted. So yes, you get lucky here. But now with that said, anybody that is ballsy enough to go real remote, and I mean real remote, I want in on that, because I think that's, you listen to Bobo's first interaction. I mean, he just drove on that logging road to the middle of nowhere and just started howling. And it didn't take very long for them to show up and be like, no, you don't run this town, son. You don't run this town. So I like both. I like finding a really beautiful spot, and I wish that for everybody that's into this. And then a group of friends that are ballsy enough for us to go far. And I mean where it's a little scary for us, that's my 2 cents.
I'm ready to go on that trip with you. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Daniel and I had some questions. We're gonna table those. We've been going almost an hour and a half. I want to go around. Go ahead,
Brian. Did we do Tim?
Oh, yeah, we should probably do that. That's why we have 2 hosts again, folks.
That's that's all good.
You go ahead.
I'll make it quick again for the interest of time. I think number one, being realistic with yourself. If you've got to be able to get to an area and access it as much as you can. If it's 6 hours away, how often are you going to be really able to get there? So it's got to be within your time frame where you can get there often. And when you're there, it takes time. You got to become normal in that environment, because you got to be threatening, and you've got to become just like everything else out there. So when you're there, the more time you're in an area, and that area, it's going to be, you're just going to be like any other thing in the woods. So you're going to be less threatening. And again, it could become to how you prepare yourself, or whether they know what firearms are or not, I'm not sure. But then, I think the areas, because reports are interesting, because you could have, it takes more than it takes, like Shane said, you got to have a Bigfoot, you got to have a witness, but then that witness has to actually have to report it too. So sometimes reports are great, but then some people aren't even reporting them; they're holding them in their back pocket. And like any other animal, you would think food, shelter, and cover though. So cover again for escape measures and water. So they've got to be around. They've got to have things to eat, and they need water, and then they've got to have areas to hide and sleep. So that's where I would say be the best spots for me.
Very good, sir. So now let's go around the horn. We've closed out the questions. Everybody had excellent answers, obviously excellent questions. It was an amazing discussion, but I want to give everybody a quick opportunity to talk about what they've got going on, what you guys got coming up. I know you guys have got irons in the fire and appearances, and we want to be respectful and let everybody know where they can catch up with you, where they can see you, where they can go. And let's start at the top there and work our way around with Shane. Go ahead, sir.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I do some speaking engagements throughout the year. I'm trying to keep it to minimal because then you're speaking more than you're being in the woods, So I'm trying to really curtail some of that. I did the Squatch Fest down in January down in Kelso, Washington. I'll be in Tennessee in July, Gatlinburg, June or July, I forget.
It's July.
July. Thank you.
July 27th, the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference.
Correct. Yeah, it should be a good one. And then I got a few more Sasquatch Summit up in Ocean Shores, Washington, coming up in November, and a few smaller ones. But mainly, it's this time of year right now is one of my favorite times to be out in the woods. This nest area is, I don't want to keep talking about it all the time, but it's just fascinating to me. They were discovered in 2015 in the month of May. We think they're being made in February and March every 4 to 5 years. Well, we're on that cycle now where we've literally just started getting out in the woods and scouring the area for large ground nests or any sign, broken huckleberry that leads to impressions. And we've been running a long-term audio project out in these areas for a couple of years now, recording every night, cataloging every animal, every noise. Chris Spencer's been leading that up, and David Ellis and a few of us. So we're just continuing to plug away in 2 specific areas in the hopes of, not just get stuff on audio and not just finding physical piece of evidence. Right now, we're running a really cool thermal project where we're trying to be able to therm nightly for days and if not weeks on end, nonstop. I just set up a therm out there yesterday as an experiment to see if how much I'll get out of it with battery life and storage, so that's kind of a neat little project we're working on. So, just plugging away like everybody else.
Awesome, sir. We appreciate that. Alex, I know you've always got a lot of irons in the fire. What can you tell us you got coming up, man?
Yeah, I've got a lot. It's sometimes hard to keep track of it myself, but I guess like in events, like Shane was saying, I don't do too many. I prefer being out in the woods and doing stuff, but I do have a few this year. I'm doing the International Cryptozoology Conference in Maine, which is in April. Doing one that Tim is actually helping put together down in New Jersey. I think that's in June, right, Tim? I think it's sometime in June, and then I'm doing the Smoky Mountain one. Also, we've got the Small Town Monsters Monster Fest end of June, which Mike is going to be at as well as a speaker. He's going to do a cool workshop. I'm doing the Alaska Bigfoot Cruise with RPG, which is really fun. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that kind of thing? I love going to Alaska. So that's in September. But aside from the events, and I have some of that on my website if you're curious, petakovmedia.com. But I've got, of course, my Beyond the Trail series that I've been doing for a few years. I'm going to be stepping away from that a little bit, doing it to a little lesser capacity. As I was talking about the mines and the stuff earlier, I'm really on board with this Strange Places series that I'm doing, which is beyond Bigfoot. It's all kinds of other, maybe some other paranormal topics a little bit, but mostly weird and interesting locations. So that's kind of a lot of that stuff you can find on the Small Town Monsters website or YouTube channel, kind of what I'm up to. But I've got probably more going on than I can handle, but that's how I like it. So I wouldn't want it any other way.
Love it, man. What about you, RPG, the busiest man in Bigfoot? What you got coming up?
Me busy? I'm not as busy as Alec. Are you kidding me? I can't even believe he's sitting down. He should be like on location, dredging towards, the lost city of gold. Come on now. Which I'm sure he's already dug deep and he's about to do a documentary on. We know this. You look up Gather Up events, from the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference in June, where they were smart enough to bring in a couple of wonderful gentlemen on this panel. And then obviously July, Smoky Mountains, Alaska. I'm stoked to get back. Like last time I filmed there was for a series, which was really cool. It was about the plane that went down with the politician and what really happened. That's another whole story. But the weather was just changing. And for those of you that have been to Alaska, if you're there at the wrong time, you better be a man's man or a woman's woman, because it'll kick your butt. But besides that, I'm really excited now that prices on infrasound have come down to really go in that direction, because I know I bring it back to academia, but really what we're talking about is everybody respect everyone, because we're all into Bigfoot, right? But then there are avenues, mine shafts, we'll call them, that we're kind of fixated on for the moment. And that's where our gut is telling us, like, explore that, figure that out. For me, I like infrasound, and I'm into the underground now too. So I think if we can all kind of respect that we're all into the same thing, but we have a different approach, then it's awesome, because it's going to be something somebody says that's like a ghost hunter. And you're like, wait, what? I had that experience. And then you start combining things. I just think an open mind is a terrible thing to waste. So I just hope to surround myself this year with as many open-minded people as possible. And I really hope I can work with Daniel sometime in the future, because I hear he's a hot shit and a good kid.
You've also missed a conference in April.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. There's more good things coming in the UK. I've signed an NDA, so I'm not allowed to talk about anything. You know that. I don't want to get sued by the Brits. But yeah, we have this awesome little get together, and it'll be the first time where Ronnie and I really get to sit side by side and talk, which I think is great for the public, because as most of you know, he replaced me. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be best buds, and you shouldn't lift each other up and learn from each other. So yeah, lots of cool stuff. And if anybody, like I said, is going remote, whether you're in this chat or any of you guys, and you need a badass dude to join you, call Daniel.
Top of the morning to you. Here's your paperwork for violating the NDA. What about you, Tim Halloran? What have you got coming up, my friend?
Oh man, so I guess first and foremost, as some on here know, I'm feverishly trying to get the second volume of the book complete. I don't even want to put a date on it yet, because if I do, I know I'm gonna miss the date. So trying to get volume 2 of the Bigfoot Influencers done. Obviously, our weekly podcast goes out every single Sunday, part of the Untold Radio Network, which is amazing. A lot of you folks have been on there already, and more to come. And then I guess the next event, Alex mentioned one in June that I don't know if I'm really helping, but I'm just supporting it in North Jersey. And then the next one, though, Ohio Bigfoot Conference. So I know Mr. Brian will be there, and I look forward to seeing you there. And yeah, just keeping busy. It's a lot of work, but we love it. That's why we're all doing this.
Absolutely. Mike, what about you, sir?
Well, I will be heading to Ohio in June for Monster Fest, as Alex said. September, I will be in Whitehall. So those are my two big Bigfoot events. Alex will be there for Whitehall as well. In June, with my co-host Christy London there, we'll be doing the Rochester Parafest, a big fundraiser for our local veterans outreach. Then I have my podcast, Where's My Sage? So we're always out doing some paranormal stuff on the side. I'm going to be pushing a lot more on using Pantones and colors to, when you guys were talking about what colors did you see, it's a nice official color. Shane and Alex have seen that, and Daniel firsthand on how we really can get that information going, and trying to do a deep dive more on UV light. And hopefully some of that's going to come out from our experiments last weekend in the swamps of Florida. So a lot more U of E stuff. And then of course, trying to help our friend Darby there at NC State University push that hair study. So, time for folks to shut up, get your samples out. If they're paying for the samples to be tested, we want to know about that DNA, send that stuff to Darby, because he's got all that information going. So I just sent a whole bunch of known animal samples to him. So got with some taxidermists and set stuff out to them. So folks that say can't pay for it, they're paying the bill. So trying to help network our friends. That's my big thing right now. Collect as much data. That's where I'm at. So yeah, Ohio and then Whitehall are my two big ones, and then the Rochester Parafest. So
awesome. Darby Orcutt right here in my home state of North Carolina doing some fantastic stuff. Daniel, what about you, sir? What have you got coming up?
So, as I mentioned with RPG, in April we've got the VIP Bigfoot Bash with RPG there, Ronnie LeBlanc and Renee Holland here in the UK. Can't wait for that. And then we have I will be at the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference in Ocala in June. Can't wait for that. And then we have the big conference coming up here in July as Brian, you as our guest headliner. Yeah, so I'll be at Cryptid Conference UK. So those are my kind of three big conferences this year, and a few others coming up. And then I have obviously my Mythical Legends podcast. And then I've got my new book out, my Bigfoot Life, and so we're yes, I'm kind of everywhere. So yeah, so thanks.
Excellent. Well, I will be at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. I'll be hanging out with Cliff Barrickman there. Cliff actually wrote the foreword to my new book, Sasquatch Unleashed: The Truth Behind the Legend. It is everywhere. You can get it anywhere you get books. You can get it directly from us if you go to paranormalworldproductions.com. We're selling some autographed copies there. We got some cool book bundles. I will be there. I'll be in Ocala at the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference. I will be up in the Smoky Mountain Conference as well. I'll be all over the place. I think we've got like 10 or 12 events through the rest of the year. You guys can go check all of that out at paranormalworldproductions.com. I appreciate everybody here. I thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. This was one of the most awesome Bigfoot roundtables I have ever been a part of. You got something before we get out of here, Daniel?
Yeah. So I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat, and thank you for everyone here on the panel for making this happen. And it's been amazing. Something that I will mention is every month this will be happening with loads of different people. And I hope that it's both me and Brian hosting together. So every month this will be happening. Don't forget to share and subscribe and like. So thank you very, very much to everyone here, and thank you very, very much to everyone in the chat.
Nothing else to say, but you guys have a great rest of your Saturday. Thank you guys so much, and here comes the outro.
They say you